Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires, it's a host of damned souls of Paralysis.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. He can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene and Mark, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And with me again tonight is Mark Johnson. I think.
You think?
I think.
You think you might remember my name this time?
Oh, God, Mark, it goes out of my... It's ever since you told me that your... Was it grandmother or auntie called you Markle Farkle? So whenever I think about you, I think Markle Farkle. Whenever you Skype me, I think, oh, Markle Farkle wants me. So it's Markle Farkle in my head. So when it comes to using your real name, it just does not come out.
Yeah, a good thing I don't use the names I have for you.
Oh, I still like Markle Farkle better. Can't you go under Markle Farkle?
Or this would be an adult-rated show.
Whatsoever.
I said if I use the names I have for you, this would be an adult-rated show.
Gosh. Oh, psychic slap round the ear for you, mister.
Yeah, just you'll send your ghosts after me. Speaking of your ghosts, I hear they've been acting up lately.
Not acting up. They've just been doing their thing, you know. It's been quite... I think a lot of it started a couple of weeks ago. They became really, really active. But then I had the children here. So high energy from the children. They feed on energy. You know, the children fed them. So,
but then you were also telling me earlier today that that your son was having some experiences at his place too.
Now that was interesting. Yes, he's got a mimicker. And I told you that what interests me is the fact that this mimicker who called his name actually called his girlfriend's name exactly at the same moment. Now, is there two mimickers in that house or is there only one?
What?
Is this one able to do this?
I think
Mimic
it's
two
one.
people's names at the same time?
I think it's obviously it's one. One mimicked his voice and then turned around and mimicked her voice.
Well, maybe there was a split second, but he said it was exactly the same time. Plus, he heard something come down the stairs. He assumed it was her going into the kitchen, and he went in the kitchen to talk to her, and obviously there was nothing there.
You know, it could possibly maybe not even be a mimicker. Maybe we're dealing with a time slip situation.
Da, 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 da.
You know, if, you know, he called up to her and then the voice repeated what he said, called up to her twice. She called down and then it mimicked her again. And then he heard footsteps come down the stairs before she came down the stairs. So maybe it's not a ghost or an entity. Maybe it's another type of phenomenon where you're dealing with a little time loop, little bit of high strangeness going on there.
Yeah, it could be. You've been thinking about this one today, haven't you, Mark, since I told you about it?
Actually, no, it just hit me right now.
Yeah, well, then you could well be right then.
I mean, their house isn't traditionally haunted, is it?
Oh, it's not so much the house. No, it's Jamie's abilities, isn't it?
True. It could be something.
He has seen things there. Definitely seen things there, but, you know.
Maybe something's passing through or attracted to him, but I don't know. My gut is telling me this was something different, having more to do with the fabric of space-time reality than it did a ghost.
Well, that sort of thing happens to me, so there's every good reason it could happen to my son as well.
Possibly. Well, we just had Halloween 2 days ago, so
yeah. And this was a very exciting house when it was going on. For 2 weeks, I've had Halloween in this house. 2 weeks.
Well, yeah,
people talking on the landing upstairs, somebody peeping their head around the door, doors opening and shutting, scratching on the door, shaking of doors, things being thrown about. I got the back of a remote control thrown at me the other day, and the remote control, I threw that out years ago. So where the hell this back come from, I don't know.
Huh. Interesting. And do you have any idea what was just thrown at you before we started the show?
Yeah. It's one of the dog's bones. Not a real bone, but one of their toy bones.
Huh. Well, at least life isn't boring.
No, it never is in this house. Never. So, like I say, it's obviously the energy of the kids. I had the kids here for 2 weeks. They went back on Sunday. And the house hasn't been too bad since Sunday. The really last thing that Brian witnessed was on Sunday. Mm-hmm. He decided that because of the kids keep coming down or raiding the cupboards during the day, that he would guard the larder at night. So he slept downstairs, and the door was shaking nearly all night long. He said he couldn't get any sleep because this blasted door to the room he was in was just shaking back and forth. So
interesting.
That was the last thing, besides this thing that's just been thrown at me now. And the cooker. The cooker switched. I watched that turn off last night.
Huh.
I stood there and I watched it turn off. It turned all the lights off on the cooker. The switch on the wall that switches the electrical. Well, it's a double oven. Switches on the ovens. Yeah.
See, my house is boring. Nothing ever happens here. Now my old houses were on areas of high activity, but this one, no, it's quiet.
Well, I can always send you a few of mine over in a box if you like.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that'll make Sherry very happy.
Yeah, definitely would, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, so shall we get on?
I think we should. So let's introduce our guest for tonight is MR Gorga. MR is a former copywriter and journalist with film and TV credentials. He brings his talents to the paranormal horror genre. A Child in the Wake of the Amityville Horror and The Summer of Sam, his talent for crafting hair-raising tales was first recognized in the 4th grade. His writing career now spans decades. His work has appeared in numerous magazines and Fox Family Channel's Real Scary Stories. He has a new book, well, it's been out since February, called Demons Among Us, Shocking Real-Life Stories from the Paranormal. So, MR, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
MR, you certainly have been up to some stuff.
I certainly have. Can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, you have been busy.
Now, with your bio, it says that you've mostly been writing fiction, or is this like your first book of just recounting true life stories? Well, what's your background a little bit?
Well, yeah, I'm a career-long writer. So I've written for marketing and advertising for many years as a copywriter. I've written for was a researcher and writer on that show that you mentioned, and written some film editorial scripts, and for documentary films, and so I just have a very long history in writing. Journalism. I started out in magazines really early on, so I have a real long history of writing. Demons Among Us is my first book concerning the paranormal, and it was a collection of incidences and things that have happened to me, as well as the very first fully documented eyewitness account of demonic possession in American history, and that was reported 20 years before the Salem witch trials. So Demons Among Us is a collection of real stories that are both mine and historical, as well as how this realm functions around in the world around us.
So you said you've had your own personal experiences. I mean, do you consider yourself, a demonologist or someone who studies demons or the darker parts of the paranormal, or is this just, what drew you to write about this particular book?
Right. Well, I don't consider myself a demonologist. I consider myself someone who just gets attacked by them.
Okay.
Snap.
Yeah. As a demonologist, I guess, would go around and really kind of perform exorcisms, and their whole world revolves around demons, and that's not me.
Okay.
So that's a little bit too much for me.
Well, have you ever noticed, MR, if ever you dealt with anything dark like this, you seem to have a sign above your head that says, "Come and get me."
Yeah, I got a big target on my back that says, kick here. But the reason why, to answer your question, the reason why I wrote Demons Among Us, which, by the way, is an Amazon #1 bestseller, I wrote it because it was an answer to a series of nighttime assaults that I was experiencing. So I was experiencing late night strangulations with invisible hands trying to choke me, evil whisperings and bitings and scratchings and just all sorts of creepy, completely terrifying nighttime things, and so I just decided to expose this realm. They love to operate in complete secrecy and in darkness, and they don't want their world exposed or how they operate. And so I got mad enough to write this book to expose demons among us. And
so you've infiltrated the world of the demon.
Well, what I like to say is basically Demons Among Us rips the veil of the paranormal back, so you can see how it really functions and operates, and what's behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Well,
so do you actually believe in demons?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I wrote about them. And not only was it an interesting thing, it was not that I was only experiencing these string of nighttime assaults, but I have functioned for many years as a prayer leader or intercessory prayer leader for a ministry that I belong to and where I go to church. And we have a prayer night, and so at the end of the night, we were kind of we get in this circle and we pray for whatever needs people might have or anything like that. And so I just decided to ask if anybody was experiencing these types of assaults and attacks at night. And then I saw one hand go up reluctantly, and then all of a sudden just all these people's hands went up. It was 13 out of 25, 30 people. And everybody was experiencing these similar attacks at night. And but nobody wanted to come forward and say anything because they thought that they would be called crazy or whatever. Yeah. And but lo and behold, all these people were going through the same exact things, very, very similar incidents at the same exact time. And that's when I got mad, and I said, okay, well, if they're assaulting me and they're assaulting us, and then God knows who else they're assaulting. And so it was those incidents that led me to really kind of shed the light on things happening in the demonic realm.
Well, let me ask you then, at what age, how old were you when you first started to experience this type of phenomenon?
I was in my 20s, and it first happened when I first became a believer in Jesus Christ, and the incidents, these things just started happening immediately. And the story goes, when I first decided to become a believer in God and in Jesus, I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. And so I decided the first time to try to pray. Now, I don't know nothing about prayer. I know nothing about the Bible. I know nothing about nothing. I'm basically, I'm an open slate, right? And so I was like, all right, well, let me give this prayer thing a shot. And so I, and one of my first prayers, it was like, well, I don't even know if you're real kind of prayers, right? And so I take the prayer, and all of a sudden I sense something kind of come into the room, and I sense something come up like right behind me, right behind my right ear, and I don't want to turn around because it doesn't feel good.
And you just hate it when they do that?
Right. So it's right up at my ear, and then it spoke clear as day. Says, you may have gone to God, but you belong to me. I'm never going to let you go. You're mine.
Wow.
Crap.
And yeah.
Well, that's a statement, isn't it?
And so, but it clarified two things in an instant. That this thing was very real. That
okay.
Satan's demons were real. God and Jesus was real, and everything in this spiritual realm is real. And, the voice itself was very interesting because it's not like you see in movies or Hollywood. It wasn't a gravelly, hoarse, monster's voice. It was the exact opposite. It was very smooth. It was very silvery and regal, even a sense of like royalty to it. But underneath that silvery tone, you sense this cunning evil. You can sense this underbelly or undercurrent of cunningness and evil underneath its tone. And so that was my very, very first experience with a demon. I don't know if it was the devil himself or a demon, but whatever it was, it was very real and very clear.
So I want to drill down on something here, because it's not normal, or normally it's people who undergo these types of attacks or attachments usually don't come out of the blue like that, especially with people who've like converted to Christianity, born again or whatnot, that's a trigger to start having this type of phenomenon. So forgive me if I ask this is the investigator part of me kicking in here.
Sure.
So I want to ask, did anything else in your life change at that time? Did you move? Did you have any kind of, big life changes within your life?
No, I mean, it was pretty the same. Okay. And, I can't say that there were any huge changes going on at the time, but I can say this, it is quite common when people become believers. What happens is you change from one team to another, and when you do that, you become a target, because people don't understand that when you become a believer or a follower of Christ, they don't understand that there is a real live spiritual enemy now out to prevent you from growing in faith or becoming influential, or anything of that sort that touts God or the goodness of God or anything of that nature. And so it's now out to, its mission is to steal, kill, and destroy. And they do that by any means necessary. And so what happens is when you do become a believer, you do have a force and a demonic entity and demonic influences now ready to oppose you, and so you have to stand at the ready. And I was fortunate enough because I'm also a musician, so I have a guitar. I was led to Christ by my guitar teacher, and he was wise enough to tell me, he goes, now get ready. You're going to come under assault. You're going to come under attack. He said, get ready. And, I didn't know what he was talking about because everything was so brand new. I had no idea what he was talking about. And
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I do. I'm sorry, Mark, but I do agree with him there because many of the cases that I've handled over the years, it's people that have gone to religion.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, but what I would also ask, because sometimes there are maybe some underlying triggers that help lead up to it. So, and again, MR, don't think I'm not believing you or discounting anything that you're saying at all. I'm not, but there have been cases where there is something that goes along family lines. Sometimes other things happening within a family that attracts some things to them, and maybe something has been there even earlier in your life, and then with you converting to Christianity, that was the trigger to make it come to the forefront. So again, my question to you is, did you ever experience anything when you were younger, or do you know of any other family members who may have experienced anything, or is there anybody in your family who you would consider to be sensitive or psychic?
No one in my family that I would consider psychic or anything. I believe that, like some people, you just know that there's something missing in your life, in your heart. There's a God-sized void in our hearts. And it was just my time to accept the call of God at that time. And I responded. And for my background, there were some incidences in childhood where it was, we were very young, and this was the time we lived in New Jersey, young growing up. And one of the episodes was we were playing in the downstairs, and there's a laundry room there. My sisters were playing around the laundry room, and I was on the steps, and this is very, very young, and this huge ghostly white hand came out of the laundry room to grab them, and they came screaming up the stairs and running past me. And the story goes is that there was this hand, and that came out of the laundry room and it tried to grab them. And so we talk about that story at holidays and stuff, but other than that, my mom wasn't psychic and my dad was not a believer at all. And they tried. That's not true. They tried to raise us like Catholic, but they really kind of didn't have anything that made any real difference in their life and the way they believed.
I understand that. My parents were Presbyterian and dragged us kids to church.
Right. And, that was it.
But you know what? There wasn't a thing where we talked about God or religion or anything outside of church. It was only, right. And even then, so it's like, I think they were doing it, especially with a lot of people from that generation. They go because that's what's expected of you, not because they were like devout believers or anything.
Yeah, and I think it was just cultural, and I just think they didn't know, and it was, Italian Catholic. And so that was just what you do, and and you want to instill goodness in your kid, but at the same time you don't know, they don't know they don't even know what's biblical and what's in the Bible, what's not in the Bible, or what's so they didn't even know, so it was just sort of religion for religion's sake.
Mm-hmm. Nope, I understand that. So Are you still to this day having experiences, or have they calmed down?
No, of course I still have experiences. And someone had asked me another show. They're like, "Are you going to put out a second book?" And I said, like Demons Among Us. I was like, God, I hope not. That means I have to go through all this horrific and terrifying stuff all over again. But I still experiencing things. Even up until last week, 2 weeks ago was one of the last things that had an experience. But so. Yeah, as long as I'm in this body, I expect to go under a demonic attack.
Irene, what are your thoughts?
I was just wondering what happened 2 weeks ago.
I'll tell you the story. It's actually it would be terrifying to most, but I've been through so many of these experiences that they did not get the reaction they wanted out of me. So the story was. On a personal note, my father passed away a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
And I think it's okay. And so I was cleaning out his closet, and he and there was things in there he hasn't worn in eons, and so I'm cleaning out, and there was this gray sweater, and the collar was a green sweater, and the collar was all worn, and it's something that he just probably hasn't worn in forever, certainly not in recent history. And there was also a Miami Hurricanes football T-shirt that was kind of new, and I was folding that up, and it was like a day or two later. I was on my bed, like going to sleep, and I just sensed something kind of, again, these things come with like a real presence, a dark presence. You always kind of feel it when it comes in. And it was my father, and he was wearing this green this green sweatshirt that I just mentioned, which he would not have been caught dead wearing in any recent history. And he was holding the Miami Hurricanes shirt.
Oh, go on.
and he's looking at me, and I know in my heart, because of the sensation, like I know it's not my father.
Yeah, you can feel it, can't you?
Yeah, they're mimicking my father, right? This thing. Yeah. And so it starts to come in for like this hug, like this real awkward hug, right? And I'm not hugging. I know there's something going on here. And so he comes in and it gives me a hug, and I don't hug it back, and it pulls its face back, and my father's face is like melted, and behind it is like this form of a skull, and it looks terrifying. It's absolutely, completely, hideously terrifying. It looks like it's like ash and sort of like, cinder burning back. And
so your father's face was actually morphing into something else.
Yeah, it was like melting off in a sense. Yeah. And then there was like these two glowing eyes within the semblance, yellow glowing eyes within the semblance of the skull. And it's looking at me directly in my face. And anybody else would have been absolutely, completely ran out of the house terrified. But since I've had so many, crazy experiences, I just looked at it and didn't respond. And then, until I basically I rebuked it, and basically you call on the name of Jesus, and these things just sort of like evaporate or vanish away. And that's what I did. And so that was the experience. It tried to mimic my father. And then its face sort of like melted off at the sides. At the sides were like the form of my dad's face, but inside was this the blackness of this skull with yellow glowing eyes. So
now, when you first
actually, Mark, you can feel the difference.
Yeah,
you can feel the difference between good and evil.
Yeah.
Did he appear solid, like he was really there, or was he see-through, like an apparition? I mean.
No, I mean, it was 100% looked like my father, because they can mimic these are supernatural creatures, so they have supernatural abilities. So they know what your father looks like. They know what your grandmother looks like. They know what they smell. They know what your great grandmother smelled like. So they know everything about who they're mimicking. They can mimic their voice. They can mimic their clothes. They can mimic their movements. They can mimic everything about them. And this was the case. This case going forward, but they didn't say anything. But they would have been able to mimic my dad's voice perfectly for sure.
But I understand how you say, you get used to this stuff.
Yeah,
it sounds crazy, but yes, you do get used to it.
You do,
with you say a prayer to Jesus or whoever. With me, it's just I just summon up all my energy and naff off. Comes
get
out
out of here
with an F on it, and that's it.
You say bug off, and they go running.
Yeah, they go.
Oh, okay. That works.
Yeah. It always works.
Demons fear Irene. I said demons fear Irene. She kind of scares me a bit too.
Right.
Well, I've had, how many years have I had at this?
I don't know. You tell us.
My age away, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Let's say since God was a boy.
Yeah.
I'm not that young anymore, so well established.
So with some of the other experiences, I mean, so it started in your 20s. So how many years now would you say you've been dealing with this?
I would say we're going on 25 years now.
And is it like a weekly thing, a monthly thing? Does it go like you go months without something happening and then all of a sudden activity starts up again? Any kind of pattern you can find to it?
It's frequent. It's not like weekly. They don't have they're not on a schedule. But, and I never charted I'm experiencing these, every so it just, just depends. Sometimes there's more activity and sometimes there's not, but it's always frequent. Whether a month passes or a month and a half or 2 months passes or whatever. But, that's tough to say because, I can't imagine going like 2 months without anything happening. So, but it is frequent.
Do you keep a journal or a diary and write these things down when they happen?
I kind of jot them down. But Demons Among Us is basically the journal of the most terrifying and the most supernatural or paranormal things that have happened to me. But I do write them down, and sometimes these things are just so memorable, you just can't forget them. Like I didn't write this thing down with my father, but I'm never going to forget it.
Right. Well, what I'm thinking of, and again, this is the investigator side of me, is by keeping a journal and writing down dates, times, what happened. Maybe over time, patterns might appear.
That's a good point.
You might be able to either predict when something is going to happen. Maybe there's something like when I do a paranormal investigation, going to somebody's house, or if I'm doing a public location, I always take down all sorts of different statistical information to compile a database to look for similarities or comparisons or things that might be triggers. Anything from the weather, moon phases, what the solar activity is like. Is it quiet? Are we getting like solar flares, X-rays? Time of year, anything along those lines that if you document for long enough, you could look to see if there are patterns. I mean, people, even moon phases, people say that things happen more in the full moon. I've never really seen that myself, but because I've had activity happen at all times of day and night and moon phases. But you know what? It might be helpful. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I never looked at it in regards to any kind of patterns or anything like that. They seem to just kind of for me, they just kind of they love the surprise factor, and so the more surprise, it's like the more surprise is the more creates the more fear. But over time, you get less and less fearful of these things that suddenly appear at night. Now they still freak me out,
right?
And they do still startle me, but they don't paralyze me in the sense where I'm freaking out where I need to run out of the house and
Well, most of these types of entities, they create situations in order to create the most amount of negative emotions and energy because they feed off of that. So, I mean, we've interviewed many people who have dealt with demonic hauntings, a very intense activity that when it comes into a location, it seems to stir people up, make them as afraid as possible, make people start to fight or have bad moods or whatever. I'll think of Tony and Deborah Pickman. I don't know if you've heard of them from the famous Sally House haunting. It was featured on the Sightings TV show back in the 90s. And they lived in this house for a couple of years, and he was scratched all the time. They caught things on video. His personality started to change because he was going through oppression, borderline possession, till they finally got out of the house. And it just worked on them for a long time, but whatever it was attached to the house and was trying to cause as much chaos as possible, because the more chaos that happens, the more upset people are, the stronger it seems to get because it's feeding off those negative emotions.
Right. Well,
with hauntings, though, it's not only negative emotions. Any high emotion, really. Like my kids when they're down.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You should, because I personally have never encountered what I would consider to be a demonic haunting. I've had some relatively negative encounters, but nothing that would make me think it was demonic.
MR?
Yes.
So what is your definition of demonic?
Well, my opinion on that. I don't personally subscribe to the traditional idea of demons. I do believe, and this is just my own personal opinion, I do believe that there are certain spirits or elemental types of entities that lean towards the negative side. There's different types. You and I have discussed this many times. There's everything from the lower level astral critters that can stir things up. They're almost like a paranormal parasite. Well, they'll stir up negativity and whatnot and feed off of that. Or then you have the more highly intelligent ones. And again, they could be anything from a negative spirit that you could think of as a demon, or even some type of elemental activity, like what happened here in Jersey with the case I was investigating in Bloomingdale for a number of years that had a lot of negative aspects to it. But whatever it was attached to the land. And I don't believe it was exactly a spirit. I think it was something else, whether it's interdimensional or I'm not sure what to call it at this point. I don't have enough data. Okay. Now, you, on the other hand, have had more direct experience with this. So what is your thoughts? What is a demon to you?
I was going to ask what MR's thought is.
Well, I believe that I believe in the evil, malevolent spirits are fallen angels, and they are fell from heaven. Now I look at it from a very biblical sense. That's the way I look at it as. So these are fallen angels. They are highly malevolent, highly intelligent, and highly manipulative, highly deceptive, and they're skilled at lying and deceiving. And so
sounds like my ex.
What's that?
I said, sounds like my ex.
Right. And so when we encounter, see, I don't look at them as like, energies or anything like that. How, and I write about this in the book, how this realm works is that they have names, but they're better known by their functions. And what I mean by that is they are spirits of specific roles, meaning spirits of depression, spirits of suicide, spirits of anger, spirits of hatred, spirits of greed, spirits of lust, spirits of pharmakoi or sorceries, which is pharmaceutical. And so to me, we have this realm of evil spirits with specific roles and function in order to influence society and individuals and to really impact them in a negative way, which they might not even know they're being influenced by because it's so subtle.
Yeah, I agree there. I agree that, you have the depression ones and the suicidal ones, because I've worked on cases where people have either been contemplating suicide, and the first thing they say is, "It's making me do it. It's pushing me to it."
Yeah, I absolutely talk about that in the book, where these people they were on various antidepressants.
Yeah,
and so in one of the stories in there, I'll just talk about this 12-year-old, I think it was 12-year-old kid or 10-year-old kid. So he kills his grandparents, right? Mm-hmm. And so what he was saying was, so he was on this medication and he kept saying, I'm hearing voices, and they're telling me to kill. And they started coming like rapid fire, kill. And it comes with like a real strong command, almost like an impulse that you can't even deny. So what he was saying was that in order to make these voices stop was to do what it was demanding me to do. And that's not the only case. There's a few cases in there. The woman who, Susan, I can't think of her last name, but she killed all of her kids. And so she was talking to, she was also on a medication. And she was asking, it was either her friend or a psychologist, do you believe in Satan? Because I'm hearing his voice. And so we have, and the connection there is these pharmaceuticals. And I go into really great detail as to why they hear these voices on these pharmaceuticals. And you can read about that it's in the middle section of the book.
Yeah. I worked on a case once where the person was actually an alcoholic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I walked in that room, I knew he wasn't the only alcoholic in that room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And half of the time, or most of the time, he was being pushed more into the drink.
Right, absolutely, yeah, because it's like spirits of alcoholism and things of that nature. So they have these roles and there's functions, and then they get their claws or their hooks into you, then you're being driven, and as you've probably heard, these things people say, I'm driven to do it. I can't stop. There's something in them that can't stop and the reason why they can't stop is because they're trying to find ways within natural means to make it stop, but they're being influenced or impelled by a supernatural being that they don't have any power within their natural means to stop a supernatural influence.
That's definitely right. Definitely. I worked on a suicide case where the girl had committed suicide. Her mother eventually owned up that she kept saying that she was being pushed to it.
Right.
What it turned out, there was something that had committed suicide previously, long before this girl was even born.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, you see, that brings me to something that I had learned a few years ago about human attachments. You know, if you're dealing with not exactly a demon, but let me go to the alcohol as a perfect example, an alcoholic. I went through some shamanic practitioner training a few years ago. And one of the things that we were discussing was human spirits that could attach to somebody. So let's say someone was an alcoholic in life. They died. Now they can't drink anymore. They miss it.
So they get their drink through someone else.
So, well, what they do is they attach themselves to somebody, and they start like experiencing vicariously through that person, through what they're feeling and sensing, and pushing them more and more. One of my teacher's sayings was, you know, the first 2 drinks belong to you. Everything else after that belongs to somebody else. And that's usually what they're saying is that they're being pushed, or whatever it is that's attached to them is pushing them towards drinking more in order so they can live, you know, relive and those sensations that they can no longer experience in death.
Yeah.
So that's just one idea. I'm not saying that there aren't real negative entities or demons that don't do this as well in order to cause harm. I mean, there are a lot of demonic cases that's what it seems that the end goal is to drive the person, you know, crazy, despondent, suicidal, get them in a position to either possess them, oppress them, first oppression, then to possession, and then eventually they kill themselves or die by other causes. But death is the finale.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, it comes in stages. Possession itself is the most extreme form of, you know, the demonic experience. But before that, you know, you have harassment, you have suggestion, and you have oppression and oppression, and which finally leads to, you know, that kind of, you know, form of possession. So, but there is such a thing as, you know, generational, it's basically generational spirits, meaning that, say, if it's alcohol or drug addiction or things of that nature, you see, the Bible says that the sins or the father or whatever, they travel 3 and 4 generations down to, you know, to people. So they have these generational curses or generational spirits over these families. That's why you have that the spirit of suicide was working on one person, and then someone else becomes born and that person kills themselves too, because they have this spirit or generational spirit over this family line or over these individuals.
So true, yeah. That's another way of looking at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to warn everybody, there's no demons are coming after you tonight. Just because you want to have a glass of wine, don't worry about it.
Oh, I have a big glass waiting for me after the show.
That's about the only spirit you get to see.
Right.
Yeah. So what other types of experiences have you had? I mean, what really stands out to you?
Well, this one is in my book, and it was the most terrifying experience I've ever experienced. And the story goes, I was in the marketing department at a local newspaper, and I was living downtown, and then I got caught in a round of layoffs, so I had to leave my swanky apartment. And I moved out west. I live in Florida, so I moved out west and into a townhome that one of my family members had abandoned. And so when I pulled up with the moving truck, the grass was overgrown and it was brown, and you know, there was like leaves scrabbling on the driveway, and the fence itself was no color in the fence. It was just all weathered, and even the door itself to the fence was hanging on one hinge and creaking in the wind. It literally looked like I drove up the home of the Munsters, and over the lot were these two over the townhome had two big block windows on either side, so they looked like two vacant eyes staring over the landscape. And so I walk into the. So when I walk, and that's what I walked into. So, but when I opened the door, inside was heartbreak. Everything was left behind. Children's toys all over the place, and letters on the table, and milk in the fridge, and dishes in the sink. It literally looked like they were just going out for an errand and coming right back.
So they fled.
It looks like they fled, yeah. And so and so that's where I decided to set up shop for the time being. And one night, I go to sleep in the bedroom was upstairs. The bedrooms were upstairs, so I'm up in the upstairs main bedroom. And one night, and all of a sudden, I start to smell this very, very rotten, death-like smell.
Oh,
and it smells like a corpse with like some sort of like gaseous note to it.
Oh God, I know that.
Kind of like brimstone, or
I've had that at night, right in my face. Right in my face.
Yeah.
Stinks.
And it was, yes, exactly. So you know how putrid it is. So I'm like,
oh,
what?
it is.
Yeah. So I say, oh, what is going on? So I was like smelling around the room, and I go downstairs to smell the garbage. It's not the garbage or the disposal. And so I look up at the air vent, and so I'm like, maybe it's coming from the air vent. And I hike up on the chair. I get a chair, and I hike up on the chair, and it's coming from the air vent, and this rot is just blowing directly onto my face. And I'm like, oh man. And so I say, okay, well, maybe it's something there. So I get off the chair, and I cut the power to the AC from the utility box, and I get back up on the chair, and the smell is still coming out from the air vent without any kind of power or mechanical assistance. And now it's just blowing out on its own directly into my face. And that's when I knew that night something was going on. And so it's Florida, it's hot, so I put the AC back on, and if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen. I go back up the stairs, go back into bed, and not long after, I'm laying there, and I see a shift in the light from behind my eyelids. And I know something moved, but I didn't want to open my eyes. So I rolled back over and turned my back to it, and then I heard a voice call out, and it said my name. It called out. It said, Michael. It was real slow, real creepy, and really it was spoken as far from a close place, but it sounded far away, like it was called from like the back of a cave or something. And it was real slow and serpentine. And that's when I rolled over. And when I rolled over, I opened my eyes. There was a figure in black at my bedside. And it was standing over me. It was tall. It was lanky with crooked shoulders. And you can see the semblance in the face deep within its hood or its cowl. And it's staring down to me with its head cocked, with a broad smile across its face, sinister smile. And I felt something on my body, and I looked down, and its hands were like polished claws, and it was creeping up my chest, and it was going to choke me. And as I looked down at and it's 3:33, and it's 3:33 in the morning, and I had an alarm clock, and it was just flashing 3:33, so it's red. There's this black figure, and I look down, and I'm looking at its gown and its robe, and its robe was very interesting, because it wasn't shreds or anything like that. It was actually neat rectangles, like at the bottom, and they were gray, to black. So the deeper the layer, the blacker it became. And it was, another interesting thing was that it was much as physical as it was spiritual, meaning I could see through parts of it. It was in 3D, but I could see through parts of it. And this thing came with such paralyzing hatred that it was venomous, it was palpable, and not only can you feel it on my body, but burning through me like hot boiling tar was the hatred it had for me and humanity. And that's what the reason why it was so fearful is that I've had many experiences, but this is the first time I've ever had it manifest to where it was like touching my body. I could see its physical being, and it was touching me as real as you could touch anybody else. And
well, that is a worse case than what I had. Literally a worse case.
Yeah.
I was laying in bed one night, and it was around about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And I woke up to this smell, which was absolutely putrid, right in my face. It was, if I had to draw it, I would say this thing had its face up to my face. The room was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. And I just said my usual words, and it just lifted. So what you went through, well,
Yeah, it's really terrifying. It's very terrifying because it comes with it's a paralyzing fear as well. So they take your breath so you can't cry out or call out, and that happens for a while until you finally are able to call out.
Yeah.
Oh, have you experienced sleep paralysis?
Oh, this was way beyond sleep paralysis.
I mean, in general.
Yeah, I don't call it sleep paralysis. I call it like demonic, like it's like a chest suppression. Like they try to take your breath and push your chest into the bed. Some call it sleep paralysis, but it comes with such a presence that comes along with it that I don't believe it's just something that you can really just put a name on as sleep paralysis. I mean, I think parapsychologists and psychologists try to put names on things that they don't understand.
Well, many people report when they're experiencing that, the old hag and things like this.
Yeah, the old hag, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that when I first moved to New Jersey 21 years ago, the house I was living in had activity, and there were a few times I experienced the sleep paralysis, and as you mentioned, the pressure on the chest. I couldn't move, and it felt, I didn't feel hands, it was more like energy pushing me down, but I didn't feel a negative presence. I felt like, I don't know what I felt. It was just something there that was letting me know it was there, and I wasn't afraid of it. And but after a while, it would go away, and I would be able to move again. The only other time it happened, and I've told this story a few times, but I was laying in bed one night, and I woke up and I was paralyzed, and I kept hearing a voice whispering in my right ear. And it was a man's voice, and it was sounding like very, very urgent. Now, I wasn't afraid, so I said, I can't understand you. Can you slow down? Speak more clearly. Well, then it seemed to get agitated and started, yelling and talking even more agitated. And I still couldn't understand what it was saying. So I said again, you need to calm down, slow down, talk slowly so I can understand you. Well, then it totally lost its shit. And I couldn't see anything, but I got the impression that it was put its face right in front of mine, an inch away, and was screaming as loud as it could in my face. I never heard anything. I just sensed it. At that point in time, I was going, okay, that's it. You're done. Out of here. And I mentally, surrounded myself with white light and imagined myself pushing it out the window behind me. And after a moment, it all went away, and I woke up and I was fine. Again, never afraid. Whatever it was, whether it was human or whether it was something else, I don't know. But I don't think it was overly negative. It was more frustrated that it couldn't communicate.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there's stories very similar. I think it was actually the stories of the experience of, I think it was the Laos people, or an Asian kind of an Asian population, and these people started dying in their sleep, and it was the origin of the Freddy Krueger story that Wes Craven used to use that. But it was, these people were experiencing what people call sleep paralysis, but these people were dying, and it was killing this community in their sleep.
You know, that's the old adage that that's what the Nightmare on Elm Street movies were based on, is the whole urban legend that if you die in a dream, you die in real life.
Right.
Which
but the initial origin of it was him reading the article about this community that was experiencing these things, and it was actually killing them. That's how he kind of came up with it.
Now, you said you also mentioned in the book the first fully recorded eyewitness account of demonic possession in American history. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just an absolutely horrifying story.
This is not the Bell Witch story.
No, Bell Witch is over here, isn't it?
No, the Bell Witch happened in Tennessee.
The Bell Witch.
But I think it was. I think that was the
17. Some girl was buried under.
Yeah, no, I think the Bell Witch was 1700s, and you're saying this happened about 20 years before the Salem witch trials, which were in the 1690s.
Yeah, well, this was 1671, and in a town in Massachusetts, and the story goes between the town minister at the time and his young 16-year-old live-in maidservant. And so she started exhibiting some signs that he found sort of very curious. And 2 weeks into this, he decided to take to his journal, which starts off on Monday, October 30th, 1671. And he wrote a blow-by-blow in his journal for the next 3 months or 90 days about the atrocities that was going on with this girl. So she started experiencing these very demonic things, and she was paralyzations, superhuman strength. Her tongue would curl back into her mouth for days on end, like it was like iron. They were trying to pry it free, but they couldn't pry it free. And so just very, very bizarre things, because she was in league with the devil for longer than was told. And I don't want to give all of the things away, but this demonic thing was trying to get her to do things that she didn't want to do, which was the reason for these attacks on her.
That was when?
1671.
1671.
What was the resolution to that?
Well, he did a remarkable thing. The minister was, he didn't straight up call her a witch and throw her to the magistrates, which would have, had her hanged. 20 years later, she would have been hanged for sure. But he had he tried to cross off every box, he medically and, things of that nature. And the doctor at the time tried to treat her with would have been medicine, which was called physic. And so, he was crossing off the boxes. Wasn't frenetic melancholy, wasn't epilepsy, it wasn't, this, and it wasn't that. And so he tried to treat her, which she started to kind of come around, but then it just came back full force, because again, it was trying to treat a supernatural problem with natural means, and it never works. And so the outcome was, well, you need to kind of like read it in the book. I can't give it away.
Right.
I got to buy the book now.
Right.
I'm thinking of buying this book anyway because I love the titles
You should.
and the contents that you've got.
Have you seen the cover?
Yeah, I've seen the cover. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. People are really kind of like, I'm surprised by the reaction to the cover, because what people are telling me all the time is that they're buying the book and then turning it over at night so they don't get freaked out by the cover.
What I want to know is, what is American demonarchy?
American demoniac.
Oh, demoniac, is it?
Right, because that was...
it's the way I read it. Demonarchy.
Yeah. Well, that was spelled in the 17th century version, which was CKE at the end of that.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's called American demoniac was that's what he was trying to find out, if she was a demoniac or not, one possessed by the devil.
Oh, I see.
There's in the on the Amazon page for the book, it says fans of The Exorcist, the Amityville Horror, and the Conjuring universe will find this virtually too frightening to read or put down. But the story you told about what happened in the 1670s reminds me, there's this movie that came out a couple years ago. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called The Witch.
Yeah, it's great. It's very well. Yeah, very, very well researched.
Very well researched for the time period.
He took elements of that, but it's fictional. About all of the, he took a fictional account of, made it into like this family who was banished, who would have gone to New Hampshire, most likely, who banished from their colony. And so, but there were elements that he took from that period. Very, very accurately, very, very well done according to the period.
Plus, and again, I won't spoil it, but let's just say that was probably one of the most effed up endings I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love that
in a movie. I like those kind of endings that just totally like take you by surprise, and you're just sitting there going, oh my God.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was well done. One of my favorite movies.
It's hard to watch. It is very disturbing.
Yeah. Well, for me, I worked on film for a long time, and so I always look at things a lot different than most. So I'm looking at like setting. I'm looking at wardrobe. I'm looking at all of the components that make up a movie, lighting and things of that nature. So for me, it was very, very well done in regards to the period. The clothes were right on. They probably used the same sort of fabric or sort of looms in it, so it was more authentic. Their building, they didn't build with today's saws, so it had that rickety kind of look you find in the 1700s. So he really did go the extra mile trying to pull off the authenticity of the period, and that's what for me stands out a lot. And that's why I love it so much. And the story itself, obviously. But right. It's everything that works together to make an authentic film of that nature.
Right. I'm also a film guy. I got my bachelor's degree in film, worked in the industry for a few years.
Nice.
So I do the same thing, too. When I watch a movie, my wife or other people get irritated with me because I'll sit there and I'll pick it apart, for lighting, for cinematography, for settings, anything about it that nobody else would ever pick up on, but I'd pick up on in a heartbeat.
Never. And especially like historians would pick up on the stuff there. And, there's a really great behind the scenes on the DVD when they talk about some of the guys from Salem, some of the That they have a panel, of historians and stuff, and so they really kind of like said the same thing I said. Is just the level of detail that was used to bring it together. It's funny because like they couldn't figure out how to make a thatched house, and so they had to call somebody. They had a hard time finding somebody who knew how to make a thatched roof.
Call somebody over in Ireland or Scotland.
My grandfather was a thatcher.
Oh, is that really right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a thatcher. He fell off the roof and broke his leg and hip.
Oh man. Well, it's tough to find thatchers in America, I suppose.
Was he married? Was he married to Margaret?
We've got a pub up the road that's thatched.
Wow.
There's not many thatchers, I don't think, in the UK, but there are.
Well, you had one as a prime minister. You had one as a prime minister.
Yeah. There's good money in thatching.
Well, nobody builds like that anymore.
Over here, these old thatched cottages, they all exist. In the villages and everything, they're everywhere.
You need somebody with those skills to help keep them up. Before the elements get them. So, yeah, excellent movie, and it's one of those things where some of the other movies you list, it's like most of those are BS, typical Hollywood. Very hard, very rare to find something that feels authentic. Even The Exorcist, which is still my favorite movie in terms of dealing with this subject matter, still took a lot of liberties. Things that would never happen, that don't really happen.
Right. Right. Exactly. They dramatized a lot for sure.
Yes. So, and most modern horror movies bore me to tears. So,
yeah,
I don't bother with them anymore.
Yeah.
But when you're also dealing with the paranormal yourself, what Hollywood comes up with isn't nearly as scary or interesting as what's really out there.
No, that's absolutely right. And they, movies in Hollywood, they get it wrong on so many levels, especially when it comes to like the devil or Lucifer or Satan. They really have him wrong in so many regards. It's ridiculous. It's such a grotesque misrepresentation of who or what he really is. And what you always see the portrayals where it's like some hairy monster or a gravelly voiced demon with these webbed wings or whatever. And when it comes down to what he really looked like, biblically speaking, according to the Bible, Lucifer or Satan himself was the most beautiful creation God ever created. I was going to
say he was meant to be a looker, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, Lucifer, which was literally translated something into the Shining One.
Light bearer.
Yes.
And the reason why they called him light bearer was because in his body itself, it was made with all kinds of shimmering jewels. It was gold, diamond, beryl, onyx, sapphire, ruby, all kind of built into his form. So whenever he moved, like in the light of God, it was like another facet of shining facet and brilliance as he moved. And not only was he dazzling heavenly spectacle, but he had the charge over the throne of God, which was not easy to get to. If you ever read what's going on at the throne of God, you don't want to get into that presence because it's thunderclaps, it's lightnings, it's roarings, and it's crazy. And so that's not a presence you can easily get into. And so his was a role that was high, like the highest role you can have there. And not only that, it's a lot of people think that he was in charge of the music or the choral ministry in heaven, because in his body itself was also, along with those jewels, was musical instruments. It says that he was he was made with pipes and timbrels. And so when he moved, itself was like this orchestral worship to God. And so what I like to say is that all of heaven sang the devil's songs. And so Lucifer himself was heaven's rock star. And so that's why he was so influential in drawing a third of the angels over to his cause to try to rebel against God so he could sit on the throne as God. And so he was this highly influential, highly regarded, beautiful, most beautiful being in heaven. And so when he fell, when they got cast out of heaven for the rebellion, that's when he became known as Satan. And Satan itself is not his name. That's a title. And Lucifer is a name, is his light bearer, but Satan is now the title of his fallen nature, meaning deceiver or supplanter or adversary, nothing good. And so that's his title now. And and that's so far different than what you might see in a movie, is because they're trying to portray evil, but the evil being they're trying to emulate is the most beautiful creation God ever made.
Well, see, a lot of those imagery goes all the way back to Renaissance times, when they started doing the Renaissance paintings showing, Satan or demons.
Sure.
And, when it has all these animalistic features, like what do they have now? The statue for the Church of Satan. Baphomet? Yeah, okay. Yeah. It was like a man-goat kind of thing. Right. But that imagery goes all the way back, and Irene and I have talked about this before when we were researching an object she has. It goes back to the old pagan ideas of combination of man and animal and beast. You could look at Pan, the god, the Roman god Pan, who was satyr, half man, half goat. A similar situation. Or even going back and looking at Egyptian religion and theology, where you have all of the gods, human bodies with animal heads. So,
right, that's true.
So that imagery is what kind of came into it. And then, of course, you have to come up with the scariest thing possible, because, Satan's supposed to be the big bad guy. So you get bat wings and horns and hooves and all of this stuff that...
Yeah. Let's make them red and give them a pitchfork and, and all that stuff. But...
But, if you're going to go that route, again, speaking of movies, I have to give kudos. I hated the movie, but I loved Tim Curry as Darkness in Legend.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, there's some very creative endeavors for sure,
mm-hmm.
But the truth of the matter is that he was, God's most beautiful, highest creation. So... and the depictions are so grotesquely wrong. Now, if he wants to show up to somebody and looking like a half goat head and cloven hooves, he could do that because he's a supernatural being. He can transform himself into anything he wants. So it's like the Bible says, even the devil transforms himself into an angel of light. So he has the ability to appear in any form he wants.
There's a lot, and I won't get off track because I think we need to concentrate more on the book, because I have a lot of thoughts about that in terms of biblical history and how a lot of those old stories really relate to a lot of earlier religions too. But let's deal with what you have experienced and others. Now, do you have other people's stories in your book?
No, I don't have no. They're all mine.
They're all yours.
Yep, they're all mine. They're a collection of my scariest encounters, along with the historical account of the possession story.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think of other stories that are out there? Let's say the Amityville Horror, not the movie, but what really happened with the Lutz family. Have you ever looked into that and their history? Because I've had the opportunity to actually meet with Christopher Quarantino, who used to go by Christopher Lutz. He was one of the Lutz children. Yeah, we had him on the show a few years back.
Right.
Now, of course, he's reluctant to talk about what actually happened because he doesn't want, because if he puts it out there in the public, he's just afraid Hollywood will take it and put it in a new movie and they make money off it and he and his family don't get anything for it.
Right, exactly. So he's smart in that regard.
Yeah, because his mother and stepfather signed away the rights and got hardly anything for it in the beginning, and now they made all these movies and their family gets nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the Amityville franchise there's so many titles in the franchise that's just sad.
Yeah, and it's based on one slightly true story, but even the book is, from what I hear, mostly BS because
fabricated.
Yeah, because you had the Warrens come in, and I make no secret about the fact that I'm no fan of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who they make the Conjuring franchise very loosely based on. But Ed Warren was kind of a shyster, and they went and investigated, and when Jay Anson was writing the book, he pretty much said, yeah, write whatever you want. So most of the stories in the book are either...
Did they actually investigate, though?
Yes, they did. Yeah, they made a few visits to the house, claimed it had all these demons. But here's the funny thing. When you're a demonologist and you focus all the time on nothing but demons, gee, what are you going to find whenever you go investigate somewhere?
Exactly.
Demons.
You're going to find demons everywhere.
Yeah.
For sure.
They're very rare over here,
Yeah, and that's something else Irene and I've talked about is the fact that we're like demon obsessed here in America, yet when you go over into Europe and other places, it's not that common. I think a lot of people tend to jump to conclusions that they have something that upsets them or scares them paranormal wise. Their first thought is, oh, it's a demon.
Over there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not like with what you're dealing with, which is definitely.
Well, when I was working all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm not working anymore.
Because you're lazy.
And if I do it, because I've retired.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
See how he talks to me?
Oh my
Do you
God.
see it, Mama?
This is our dynamic for years now.
That's a good dynamic.
What about now? You said some of these titles do put the spooks up you if you were reading the titles. But Angels Heard on High, that sounds quite sweet.
Angels Heard on High, yeah, because I couldn't talk about all of this dark stuff. You're talking about a title of one of my chapters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was an experience because I have both paranormal and supernatural experiences. And if, I know there's groups out there who split hairs over the differences between paranormal and supernatural.
Yeah.
And so, I couldn't talk about all of this dark stuff about talking about some of the other things that have happened in the good side or the good sense. And that's why I've also included that chapter, Angels Heard on High.
I see. And was it you that heard them?
Yes. It was, I don't know how to call it, I guess like an audible vision or auditory, heard it auditorily, just by hearing only. And that was very, frightening in the sense because, God himself could be very, very terrifying and frightening. And, he's not, a fluffy Santa Claus in the sky,
So they say, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a terror side to him. Yeah. And so when this started, and you're the very first show to actually ask me about this, so forgive me if I don't talk about it as clearly. So when this happened, it was, it came, I can't remember exactly what time it was, but I was in New York at the time. And so at first, when I first heard it, I think I might have been like in prayer at the time, and I was on my bed, and I just heard this rumbling faintly in the background in my mind, right? And then all of a sudden it just started getting increasingly louder, and the thunderclaps got so intense that I folded up into like a ball at the dread of it, because it was, think of the worst thunderclap you have ever experienced, and then times 1,000. And so I start hearing this this rolling sort of thunderclap, and then all of a sudden, like out of this thunderclap, like it clears away, and I start to hear this singing, this very beautiful voices. And at first, I was going to church in New York City. It was called Times Square Church. So at first, I think I'm hearing like the choir. And then I realized that these voices were too perfect. Like there was no flaw in the voice. There was no, it was as if they had like these glass pipes for their larynxes, just coming out so smoothly. And they were singing Hallelujah, Hallelujah in such a rhythm. Excuse my noises over here. My computer has a mind of its own. They were singing in such and with such rhythms and layers that there was just millions upon millions of them in like this unison, and one note just kind of floated up and through these layers, just this glassy note, and then came down, like it's swimming down through these layers, and then came back up. And if you ever heard like the rim of a glass, it was like this voice. I can't put human or natural,
but it was beautiful,
yeah, because it was the words don't exist to describe it.
Yeah.
In the natural sense, but I'm doing my best. So it was just kind of like swimming between these layers, going up and down. And then after I heard this angelic choir, that's when the audible voice of God spoke, and it was like an avalanche, and 100 avalanches really. And it was just like, and out of it, he said, from this time on, your words will be used for my glory. And that's when I kind of like folded up again into this little ball, and I said, okay, whatever you say goes. I'll do it, whatever you want. And so that was like the angelic choir experience that I wrote about in the book.
And what do you mean? What do you think he meant by your words would be for his glory?
That, whether it's in the writing sense or in the speaking sense, that my words were going to be used for his purposes, and his kingdom, and to promote the kingdom of God.
Now, how did you feel when you heard that voice compared to the other voice, which obviously was more sinister, but could you feel a difference in the energy?
Yeah, I wanted to die. It was so terrifying because of the holiness.
Wait a minute, I'm trying to absorb that.
Satan has like that undercurrent of evil.
Yeah.
But God's voice, in that sense, and this is biblical as well. So I heard what other people's heard in the Bible, that they wanted the voice to stop. It was so terrifying because of its power. And basically, whoever spoke that voice can just crush this planet like an ant.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it was. And that's why, because there's a dread, but there's a beautiful dread to it, meaning that it's not going to, it wasn't going to crush me because it would have told me to do what he told me what he wanted to do, right? But behind that voice is absolute utter terror. Again, we're not dealing with a Santa Claus in the sky here. We're dealing with a God, an almighty God, an omnipotent God that is very real and very in tune with the affairs of mankind and in relationship with individuals. And that's not the first time I've heard that voice, the voice of God. The first time I've heard it was, a very placid, very baritone, masculine, comforting voice that that it sounded like, in the Bible talks about the sound of many waters, and that's the only way that writer can describe it, and that's very, very close, where it was very, very placid, like the sound of many waters, and
relaxing.
Yeah, exactly, but very, very royal, and meaning that behind this voice was absolute royal authority and had the whole world, forgive me, but in his hands.
But what's interesting, I'm going to go back to the very beginning of our interview when you first talked about the demonic voice.
Yeah.
You described it very much the same way. The royal,
right.
It had a royalty.
There was a princely tone to it. So the difference was that it was princely and silvery, but the voice of Jesus was gold and absolute royalty.
Okay. So now,
does that make any sense? There's a distinction between a prince and a king, right?
So the voice you heard, was it Jesus or God?
Well, Jesus. I believe Jesus is God. So when you're hearing the voice of Jesus, you're hearing the voice of God. I am. It says, "I and the Father are one."
Okay. Interesting.
Makes you think. My brain's going boom, 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 boom. I can feel the clogs going over here. And I think they would have come in that voice because they're not wanting to scare you at that particular time. So they're going to use a smooth voice.
Right. Well, you're talking about the demonic voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it came very, very smooth and subtle, and that was that's the deceiving part of evil. And that's what makes evil so evil, is that, if you're not aware that it's evil, because evil comes in a form of good or things that you like or feel good, or, and evil comes with like he tempted Eve with a fruit that looked good to the eyes and appealing to the senses, right? And so he does the same exact thing. And the thing with his voice is not going to come at you like he's a monster, because then you just run. Right. So
he won't react the way he wants you to.
Right. And so, in regards to his tone, you can sense the undercurrent of evil just below that that silvery voice, but in difference to God, it was like full-blown kingly golden royalty. There's a difference between the authority.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can describe it. Again, we're talking about very spiritual concepts that are not readily explainable in a natural sense.
Yeah.
Have you had you've had experiences with demons. Have you had experiences with what you would consider angels?
Well, that's what I wrote about, angels heard on high.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was I haven't seen physical angels in that sense, but it's, that was the only experience that I know of that I can hear with my natural abilities, with my natural senses. Now, are there angels all around that you can't see? The Bible says so, yeah. So, but that was the only one I have that I can hear with my senses.
Yeah. Well, this is it, you see. We've got these senses.
Yeah.
We're built in, well, every animal has, but we are built with these senses. That's how we're able to detect what's good, what's bad, what's evil, what's not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But that was when I wrote Angels Heard on High, that was the only time I've heard an angelic choir. Not only, it wasn't just the voice of an angel, it was countless millions in unison singing. So I can't quite explain it with my, being, a natural being trying to convey supernatural things.
It must have been very beautiful.
It was like unlike anything I've ever heard. Unlike anything. Yeah. Because it got increasingly louder too, just like the rumbling did. But that, at first I thought it was, I thought it was just like a natural choir, and then it just got too clear, too beautiful, too crystal, too high, in a sense.
And were you in a church at the time?
No, I was in my bedroom.
Oh, you were in your bedroom?
Yeah.
Wow, Mark.
Very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I say.
Yeah.
So,
well, the spiritual realm is a very, very real realm. So you have, you have good, you have evil, and my the goal of my book was to open the eyes to both.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, people are definitely going to have to pick up this book and read it. You say it has been number 1 on Amazon?
Yeah, it reached a number 1 bestseller on Amazon. I don't know how long it stayed at that position because it shifts all the time.
You're very, very lucky. Mine's not getting anywhere near that. About a million. But mind you, mine was attacked, wasn't it, Mark?
Oh man,
Yeah.
what'd you get to?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Come on.
No. Nothing.
Books are. We actually had a publishing company for a while, and books are a real hard sell at times. Although demons is a very popular subject, so
not only that, but it was attacked.
Yeah, we had somebody trying to sabotage it, so he himself must be a demon, in my opinion. But
so I never bothered with it after that. It's out there. I just don't bother.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So your book, Demons Among Us. Now, it's available on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle. And how can people get in touch with you? Or do you do any speaking engagements?
No, I would love to do some speaking engagements. So if anyone's listening to your show and wants to have me on as a speaker, I'm more than happy to do that. I would love that. But you can get in touch with me on my my social channels, which would be Facebook. You can find me at MR Gorga. And at Instagram, you can find me at m.r.gorga.
Gorga, Gorga, for you people taking notes.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, 2 hard G's in there.
Well, MR, thank you very much for coming on the program tonight. This has been really, really fascinating.
I'm going to send you a Facebook friend request.
I will accept that request as soon as I get in front of my phone.
Okay. All right. So our guest tonight has been MR Gorga and his book Demons Among Us. So pick up your copy, and when you start to read it, be prepared to be up all night.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Well, again, MR, thank you for coming on the program, and want to thank our listeners for tuning in to another episode of the Paranormal UK radio show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. And Irene, where can people find us?
Everywhere, people. Just about everywhere.
Everywhere. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we will catch you all next week. So everyone have a great week, and be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good night. See you later, Irene.